Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ASEAN Future of Work conference track that is part of HR Tech Festival Asia Online 2021 in partnership with the Ministry of Manpower of Singapore. Now, the first session we have for the day is an interesting panel discussion about harnessing the potential of hybrid work for a more inclusive future of work. Is it a blessing or a burden? And with us this exciting morning, we have four incredible speakers. We have Jacqueline Gwee, Director and Founder from aAdvantage Consulting Group Private Limited. We have Haja Mahuran Saro Dato Haji Sariki, who's the Head Group Research for Development and Policy and Head for the Malaysian Professional Talent from the Talent Corporation Malaysia Berhad. We have Sunil Setlur, who's the Global Chief People Officer from Gojek. And we have Najati Ghosheh, who's the Legal Specialist, Inclusive Labour Markets, Labour Relations and Working Conditions Branch from the International Labour Organization. Without further ado, let's welcome our speakers. Over to you, Jacqueline.
Thanks, Maya. Yes, we have an exciting panel, to share their experience I suppose, on this topic on hybrid work. And we know that pre-COVID, flexible work arrangements has been implemented as part of the organization strategy to attract and retain talent. Although some forms of flexibility has actually been more easily implemented than others. For example, I think especially in Singapore, enabling employees to adjust, their work time, their start time, their end time, has always been more extensively implemented than flexible work arrangements like teleworking or telecommuting. So many organizations have formalized the telecommuting policies. However, practice has shown, right, that not all jobs across sectors, you can actually implement hybrid work easily. So during COVID, we noted, of course, that during the lockdowns, MCOs, circuit breakers across countries actually require employees who are not in frontline essential services to work from home. So many organizations which had business continuity plans in place could quickly execute them. They were actually prepared, to implement, hybrid work actually and adjust to it more easily. Okay. So this experience working from home or offsite for organizations demonstrated that businesses could still achieve its outcomes when implemented well. However, working from home is not possible. I think we all know and accept that for all jobs across all sectors. But many leaders do recognize that hybrid work models are likely to persist simply because employees are asking for it. So I've seen really some surveys done recently. Employees are prepared to say, hey, they're prepared to leave the organizations, or some employees are actually saying, hey, I only take that offer up if, let's say, the organization allows, or implements hybrid work. So how real is this for organizations to address this as part of the talent strategy? So this morning, our panel will share their experience and discuss what organizations can do to implement hybrid work to promote a more inclusive world of work. So some of the key discussion points, that we have are how do we implement sustainable hybrid models beyond the pandemic? How hybrid work can provide a way for businesses to remain resilient during future disruptions like perhaps another pandemic. How hybrid work can present opportunities for employers to promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace by eliminating barriers related to location, disabilities, and caregiving. And finally, what is the role of unions, employees to implement hybrid work sustainably and not disproportionately impacting lower wage workers. So maybe we can kick off this morning's discussion with Najati. Okay, so Najati has been part of the ILO, International Labour Organizations. I'm quite sure you have seen that during this pandemic, many organizations have adopted hybrid work models. So do you see that this trend is in certain countries and regions? Are they more so implemented, than others? What do you see as some of the advantages and disadvantages of using hybrid work for workers and employers? Do you see, is it a burden or is it a blessing? Najati, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say that one of the things that I think we need to be clear about, certainly in terms of the work that we do, is really defining and being very clear what we mean when we talk about telework. When we talk about telework, we're really talking about the use of information and communication technology, smartphones, tablets, desktop computers, for the purpose of work outside of the employer's workplace or premises. This is important because there are a lot of people who are confusing some of the definition, shall we say, with regard to what telework actually is. Now, telework is not a new concept. It's been around since the 1970s. But realistically, data collection has been very soft at the national level and in many, so we rely to some extent on research prior to 2020. Since 2020, there's been, of course, a very great interest in terms of figuring out how much this has taken place, how extensive telework is actually used. And that really, it's I would say that what we would refer to as mandatory telework, which in this context was a sort of imposed telework due to the COVID pandemic. I think that that's something that we need to bear in mind, that it was not a normal agreed form of telework. But the data that's available, that was available sort of in this period or just prior, it's limited, but as I say, there is some data available. So in the European Union, which is composed of 27 member countries, 15% of workers in 2019 were teleworking. In 2020, that number jumped to 40% of active workers. So this exploded really during the pandemic, and it showed us a lot about what telework is, the strengths and the weaknesses, and of how it can work. The other issue places where we do have information, there's been research in Italy, France, Germany, Spain, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. And their projections are that 24% to 31% of jobs could be done remotely. So, and in the United States, research has indicated that 34% of jobs could be done remotely. So this is something that is not going away. It's something that is ongoing, and at the moment, I would say that it's something that we're monitoring. It's something that's been an active part of our work, I would say central to the work that I and my colleagues my unit have been doing for the last year and a half. So
thank you, Najati. I think, basically what I'm hearing, right, is that especially data from Europe is actually shows, right, that telework is kind of like is going to persist, and actually, especially during, the recent year, that numbers have jumped up. So do you actually see that the telework is actually more suited, for certain jobs, or more suited for certain jobs in certain sectors? What are your thoughts on it, and what do you think is the role of government, employees, and unions, to ensure that, that telework is, or, hybrid work, right, is available to as many people as possible and is as inclusive as possible?
yes, yeah, I would say that generally speaking, telework can be used in any sort of environment where ICTs are used. So you'll find it more strongly in certain sectors of the economy. So the services sector, banking, finance, business, universities to some extent, public administration, government work. But also I would say you will find it in office-based work. And office-based work can be in the services sector, but office-based work, for example, can be in manufacturing. So for example, people who are involved in administrative tasks or bookkeeping or accounting, in theory, this could also be done as a form of telework, or a hybrid schedule could be developed with regard to that. I think with regard to ensuring that that these policies are developed in a sound way. Our experience is that when government workers and employers discuss what type of policies or regulatory guidance or legal instruments they want to create, everybody has a commitment to making those policies and guidance and requirements work. So in the first instance, we believe that there should be active engagement by all parties to try and put this together. And in addition, I think from our perspective, it's not only about developing it in the first stage, it's about implementation and ongoing review. So having this type of dialogue, I think, is very important, and establishing is very important to ensuring that good and decent telework and hybrid work is achieved and is in a transparent and equitable way for everybody.
Okay, thank you for that, Najati. I think basically what we're hearing is that implementation is key, and part of implementation is actually engaging, our workforce to also get the feedback. So it's not just engaging and developing the policies. So thanks for that. I think maybe we can actually hear from Mahuran. Basically, I think in Malaysia, Telecom, has been advocating widely the adoption of FWAs even before, the pandemic. So maybe what was, Telecom's objectives, in promoting, the adoption of FWAs? Were there specific, sectors or job functions that were more suited to adopting, FWAs?
Thank you, Jacqueline. Okay, before I answer your question, just to have a brief introduction about Telecom. Okay, Telecom is the agency under the Ministry of Human Resources. So our task is actually to attract, nurture, and also the retain talent to support the Malaysian's growth. So we build industry linkages, advocate policies, and introduce the best practices, implement intervention program to close the skill gaps. Okay, so partnership is our key strategy. So we work together with the government, with industry and academia to ensure that Malaysia have the sufficient supply of skilled talent to meet demand. So we have three thrusts. Okay, the first thrust is to optimize the Malaysian talent, is to prepare our Malaysian students and graduates to meet demands generated by the economy, and we also facilitate our placement of the government scholar in the labour market. The third one also, we facilitate women back into the workforce via policy advocacy. And we encourage also the upskilling of Malaysian talent via our non-HRDF contributing employers. Okay, the thrust number 2 is to facilitate the global talent. How we do it? To attract and retain global talent, be they Malaysians or foreign, that is a skilled professional. So the third one is the build networks of top talent. So how we do it? We collaborate and establish the channel for the Malaysians to contribute from abroad. So to answer the questions, Jacqueline, in terms of what is the objective of Telecom in promoting the adoption of FWA. So frankly, we say that flexible work arrangement, we call it FWA, is the government initiative, okay, effort to ensure the diversity and inclusion practice are recognized for the future-proof workplace and also the workforce. So the government of Malaysia recognize the importance of this diversity and inclusion, including the female labour force participation and senior talent, part of the growth of the country. So several targets was set in the 10 Malaysia plan. So to increase the female labour force participation from 46% to the 55% by 2015, and also the increased percentage of women in decision making to 30% in 2016. And this policy continues in the 11 Malaysia plan, meaning that we target of women in the labour force increased to 59% by 2020, and we also emphasize to achieve 30% of women in the key decision-making position in public and also the private sector. So we have also have a Life at Work initiative and award, okay, event that recognize the organization with leading diversity and inclusion practices that support employees' work advancement for the IR 4.0, create a better workplace environment for the employees' engagement and experience to drive productivity and innovation. The third one is to make sure that they have a future-proof workforce, job skill, and job capabilities for the future of work. So the question is, why implement FWAs? Okay, right? So we have to make sure that it's to promote the better work-life integration in balancing professional and the personal commitment. So we have to make sure that it's to provide support to working parents in an organization and motivate the employees to work to their fullest capability through flexible working arrangement. The question is whether which sector and job function are more suited to adopt FWAs. So the answer to that is not all jobs can implement FWAs. Okay. In a report title, what I refer to is What Next for Remote Work, an analysis of 2,000 tasks, 800 jobs, and 9 countries from McKinsey find that the potential for remote work is highly concentrated among high-skilled, high-educated workers to industry, occupation, and geographics. And based in our engagement, Telecom engagement with our industry and with our stakeholders, we concur that to determine and identify jobs that potentially feasible for FWA, we have to use the tasks, activities, the time spent, deliverables within the job occupation. Okay, so why I say that? Because there are many types of FWAs. For example, the schedule of working hours, like we call flexi hours, staggered hours, and the total amount of working hours, like part-time or compressed work. So the key point here is we must do is to analyze the job task for the whole team as well as the individual job level to determine the right FWAs to implement. I give this example, okay? Sector, professional services sector. Okay, if we define into whether they can work on, whether they can practice the flexi working hours, the answer is yes. Whether they can, the workers can work from home, the answer is yes. This is a professional sector, professional service sector. Whether we can apply part-time employment, the answer is yes. Now I go to the second sector, healthcare. Okay, can we practice, can we do a flexi work part in the healthcare sector? The answer is yes. Can we go on work from home? The answer is no. Okay, how you can go to the, you can work from home and you see the patients at home. Yeah, so that is one example on the sector. And another sector that I want to give example is the government or GLC or private sector, and we divide into a sub-sector, work. For example, the counter, the front counter. Can these people work from home? Okay. The answer is no. Okay, but can we work a flexi work? The answer is yes. Okay, and what about the processing team? Okay, for this sector, so the processing team, yes, can work on the flexi things, can work from home, can work on job sharing also. Yeah, so this is the example that I can give as at now. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thanks, Mahuran. I think what I'm hearing is that because of hybrid work and telecommuting, or telework, depending on how you define it, is actually kind of like a subset, right, of FWAs or flexible work arrangements. So what we're hearing that, yes, we can have a variety of flexible arrangements that organizations, can be encouraged, right, to implement. But however, when it comes to hybrid work or specifically work from home or telework, then it really depends on the job itself. Yeah, so thanks for that. And maybe I think it's maybe time to move on to maybe have a question for Sunil, right? Sunil, I think I think what would be interesting, from your perspective is that because Gojek, right, is operating in a number of countries, and then with different, of course, demands, from a different workforce, and you have different roles, right, obviously in the organization. So when did Gojek actually start embracing hybrid work? What were some of the company's considerations when implementing flexible work arrangement, in particular, working from home, and of course, because your workforce, across Asia is actually quite diverse. So how, maybe you can share a little bit about that, Sunil.
Thanks, Jacqueline. I think Najati and Mahuran have done a great job of setting the stage, right? I think it's important to understand hybrid working. I prefer Najati's term, teleworking. I think it's more accurate. And Mahuran did a great job sort of articulating the different types of jobs that find it's easier to sort of do teleworking versus not. So thank you for setting that amazing stage. Gojek is sort of, we're across a number of countries in Southeast Asia, and we have a mix of people doing a mix of roles. So broadly, I would say we have a group of people who I would say are doing feet on street work. They're engaging with merchants, drivers, stakeholders on the ground, customers on the ground, and that body of work cannot be done in a telecommuting way. or in a teleworking way. You have to physically be there. There's another group of people, functions like finance, HR, legal, which are more office-oriented functions that sit together. Those lend themselves more naturally to teleworking because it's fairly standardized. Your SOPs are clear. A lot of the work is digitized, hopefully. I know some departments are still on paper and pencil, but for the most part, I think, given that we're a younger company, we didn't have that. We started off digital, so those digital processes carried on. And I think there's a part of our workforce that does product development work. They actually understand the needs of the customer, and they iterate and experiment on our products to make sure that those needs are being met or addressed. Technically, they can do that remotely, but realistically speaking, the speed of innovation, which is a critical success factor for us as a tech company, means that those teams tend to actually come together for moments of collaboration. And I think the dynamics have played out. We have offices in India, Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore. So and wherever we have product in market, so like Singapore, Vietnam, and Indonesia, we have a product in market. It's a bit of a balance game between the feet on street organization and the product development organization, because if you have a product in the market, you need to go out and be talking to customers. So that's the overall context of Gojek. To answer your question more directly, Jacqueline, I think the fact that we were so distributed already meant that we found it easier to switch to this setup, the remote working setup, and a hybrid, quote unquote, hybrid setup, much more. Our workforce was constantly traveling around the region. Most of our employees have laptops, for instance, something as simple as a logistical element there. So it was easy to flick the switch and pretend we were all traveling and working from different office. So, I think, and the fact that we were experiencing it at the same time was novel. Usually people travel to headquarters or people travel to the markets, and then they have an experience. But now everyone is sort of working from home. I think that was sort of a great equalizer for us. So the dynamics that have played out is it's created an extremely inclusive environment. It's actually made the world a lot more flatter. Everyone has the same access to leadership, to decision making, to information and context. And I think it's been great for us from that perspective. It's also been challenging because a big part of our product is about making the lives of people, the lived lives of people, better. And our employees not being able to go into the market and really experience those challenges or experience the things that can make our customers' lives better is I would say, something we grapple with every day. We found other ways to get that input and information, but nothing beats actually being on the ground and living the experience of the product. So that's one dimension. The other dimension is different countries had different ways they approach this. I think Singapore, in my mind, set a bit of a standard in the region. We also had to deal with, an unfortunate massive surge in COVID in India and a massive surge in COVID in Indonesia, which required us as an employer to really pivot and think really hard about our principles of work, which is we actually just flat out said employee health and safety is the number one thing. And that means if you're not coming into the office, you don't have to come into the office. You can work from home for as long as you want. In fact, even today, a year and a half in, working from home is the default option at Gojek, right? So we said employee health and safety. We also took a much more conservative stance. We didn't link our office reopening policies to government reopening. We said whatever the government orders are, use your own discretion. But our offices will open on a much more conservative schedule. So I think that's something we've done, and that's because we really care about our employees' well-being. And the second dimension is we want to introduce certainty, because with the lockdown opening up, looking at case count. That's a lot of variables to manage as a business and as an employee. It induces massive amounts of anxiety. So if you are going with the flow of someone else setting the pace of when you can go out and when you can come in, it becomes extremely challenging. So we said, let's create certainty for our people. Health and safety is important. Certainty is important. Access to information, credible information is important. We've even done things like vaccination drives, etc., to help our people. So I think those three things have really come together to shape our approach to this.
Right. Thank you for that. And I think maybe earlier on, when Najati was talking about, not only the definition of telework, but I think Najati also talked about, the importance of the usage of technology, right? That actually drives, the availability or the possibility of implementing, hybrid work. So I'm just, so maybe Sunil, do you also see that, was it only technology? How about the mindset, of the people? Were people more open, were there, how do you see the impact, of, the pandemic itself? Did it change mindsets on hybrid work?
I certainly think it has, and it's surprisingly, it's an iterative process. We find that as we poll people over a period of 4 months to 6 months, preferences change. When we first started, everyone was excited, saying, "Oh, we can work from home. It's great." There were a vocal minority of people saying, "No, we will have to come back to the office as soon as we can." We understand that's not today, but as soon as we can. But over time, we found that a lot of people said, "Oh, we love working from home." That was month 7, month 8. If I look at data more recently, it's been a year and a half of people working from home. 70%, 65, 70% of our people actually want to have the option to come back into the office. They don't want to come back permanently the way it used to be. But they do want to come back some days in a week. And I think that's been interesting. And I think the longer we stay in this state, the more the heart will yearn for how it used to be. And I think people will appreciate the role of the office. I think the other dimension here I do want to call out is the roles people play in their lives, right? If you're a parent, caregiver, if you're a single person living in a flat with maybe 3 other roommates, it's very, very challenging to work from home. Going to the office is actually a release. If you have children, you're homeschooling or who are going through homeschooling, it's very, very challenging to do work.
Right.
So I think organizations also have to think about, and we certainly are thinking about, how do we address these different constituencies within our organization? Not everyone wants to work from home.
Yeah.
And maybe that doesn't mean we come back to the office. Maybe that means you go to a Gojek sponsored, co-working space somewhere nearby, or we take care of, you can work from a cafe if that's your jam, right? So I think those things are important.
Right.
And I think we do need to think about how to holistically approach this, because we can't approach this, we can't look at our workforce as a blanket anymore. Work has always been a very personal experience, but people have been willing to make compromises to adapt to the organization, because the job or the brand or the experience that a platform that organization offered was great. Now people have had almost 2 years of working in a way that's highly customized to their life. Right. And to the flow of their life. So I think that trend is there to stay, and organizations now have to adapt to how do we enable these different constituencies within the company to do meaningful things for their people. How do we make the act of work easy?
Okay, thanks for that. I think, Sunil, basically what I'm hearing is that for the organization, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of an implementation and designing your policies. It could differ, let's say, depending on the country. It would differ depending on the jobs and the job roles. It will also, it's also about giving options, right? What does hybrid work mean? It may not mean the same thing, for all groups of people in the organization, right? So I think it's about listening and after adjusting our policies. But what we are also seeing, is that a lot more openness and acceptance, to maybe different ways of, even designing your hybrid work. Yeah. So maybe with that, we can go back, to Mahuran. Mahuran, I'm just thinking, from, with, if you see, also observe, this change in mindset, towards, hybrid work, because obviously, like in Singapore and I'm quite sure many countries, hybrid work, has been tried, so to speak, especially during this pandemic. So how do you see, that hybrid work can be seen even by business leaders, as a means to remain resilient during, future pandemics? Because I suppose this thinking, that, hey, COVID-19, right? There may be another, COVID-19, or another variant, So how do you see that business leaders, can use hybrid work as a means to remain resilient?
Thank you, Jacqueline. Okay, before I answer your questions is how these business leaders can use this hybrid work to remain resilient. I would like to share what we do, the survey, the survey that we done, a live at work survey conducted in 2017, that is before pandemic. 90% agree that the telework, the hybrid work are a key strategy for addressing the workforce needs of the future. Okay, but only 26% have formalized it. Okay, even the 76 agree, but 26 only agree to formalize it. So the MCO experience have shifted the perceptions about what is possible and also the probable in the FWAs. Okay, and in 2020, that is during the pandemic, that we got our pandemic in I think March in 2020, and we conducted a survey. We worked together with UNDP in, I would say, in August, probably into August 2020. We conduct the survey to understand the type of FWA and the WLPs, okay, implemented by the employer. For this survey, again, the definition of the WLP, the work-life practices, is the various form of support of the work-life integration. And the study shows that the top of the 5 WAs are the flexi hours. Okay, that is 48%. The living early from work is 34%. Staggered hours is 22%, and work from home is 16%. So what we learn from that, okay, is this. Okay, first one is FWA. Telework is if we implement it well, can improve both employees' quality of life and also the productivity. So the report shows that the employers cited improving employees' well-being as the top reason for offering the WLPs, 76%, followed by the improving workforce productivity, that is 65%, and retain high-performing employees, 64%, and attract to top talent. So Telecom also conducted a series of webinar, okay, featuring the private companies that have adopted this hybrid work to remain resilient, okay, during this pandemic, and to promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Okay, some of the key takeaways that I can share here is this. The first one is this: technology, as mentioned by our two colleagues, Sunil and Najati. Technology and digitalization have made it works. Significantly more flexible for the employees that can work anytime, anywhere. Okay, so on top of that, you know that social norms and the family dynamics are changing. So employees today juggle between their commitment to work and also the personal life. Okay, and so it's gone the days, where productivity is measured by those number of hours employees spend at their office. Therefore, this call for the greater flexibility where work productivity does not affect one's commitment to personal or family life and vice versa. Okay. The second one that I would like to share is the approach to go into the hybrid working arrangement must include, okay, to redesign the workplace and also introduce the hot desking, okay, and of course the collaborative meeting rooms. So employees are empowered. We have to give empowered to decide where they want to work, Okay, but of course, based on the business needs, okay, and they cannot make decision. They have to work together, communicate with their supervisor, their leaders, and also to meet the client expectation and also the personal preference. All those category and all those features must be discussed openly between the employees and also the supervisor. Okay, the third one is this. It is important for companies to support in keeping them engaged, okay, and productive while they are working off-site, not on-site, right? Working off-site, working from home or working elsewhere that Sunil mentioned just now, by enhancing the collaboration tools or having a regular check-in, check-out with the employee engagement. I call it, employee engagement. So through the social media, okay? So those that are beyond the company's control, of course, okay? But being flexible and adaptable help companies to better manage changes, especially during this pandemic. And of course, the last one is we must also, the companies also we have to look at the compensation and benefit, right? For example, the data lines always, or the technology needed, computer needed by the employees. So that's what I can share on this topic and how we can make sure that this hybrid work to remain resilient to the business. Okay.
Thanks, Mahuran. Actually, I was just thinking, Sunil, earlier on you did allude to, there will be some, changes, in terms of your policies. Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more. I think based on maybe what Mahuran has mentioned, rethinking of, even the workspace itself, is actually what some companies are actually started, doing. So perhaps you can share, Sunil, some of the changes upcoming, that Gojek is looking at, to pursue.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was so happy to hear Mahuran describe those things, because that's how our offices are already designed. We assume a ratio of people that assumes that not everyone is in office. We spend more of our real estate space on collaboration spaces and interaction spaces than we do anything else. So I think that's there. I would say it's not upcoming new policies, it's policies that we already had in place, which is, making sure that how do we support people longer horizon as the work from home. Initially, last year, when we all had to do the sudden switch, one of the ways we did that was we just gave people a flat amount to set up a home office or a home work setup, which really helped make life a little bit easier. And that made sense for a quick pivot. But now that we're entering year 2, year 3, what are the foundational things that need to change, right? How does benefits need to change? One of our benefits is, you get a limited number of Gojek rides for free if you're an employee. Does that make sense if no one is traveling anymore, or no one's going around anymore? I think that's something we have to think about. And the other thing that we are thinking about is we haven't gotten a full-fledged policy out yet, but we will soon, is remote work. Like, what percentage of our roles can be done fully remotely all the time, 100%, irrespective of geography, time zone, etc. So I think that's something we're thinking very hard about. Today, I think remote work means domestic remote work, like you're in India and you're working from different parts of India, you're in Indonesia, working from different parts of Indonesia. So it means not being in office. But if you really truly look at the all-encompassing definition of remote work, it could mean work from anywhere by anyone who can do the job. So what are the implications to our existing sort of frameworks, culture, policies? How do we look at performance? How do we look at pay? How do we look at transparency in our processes, etc.? I think a lot of that has a huge impact. For instance, the biggest impact is, you become a position-based organization, which is you just have a bunch of positions and people live in those positions. And if they want growth, they go to other positions. That's not the nature of our culture today, where people grow within their roles, the roles grow in size, etc. And they see a change in levels, jobs. That's a big shift culturally, moving from an environment where you have a lot of agency over the shape of your role, and therefore you have some influence over the growth your role experience and therefore you experience, to a position-based organization where it's a bit more narrowly defined. Both are right. There isn't a best way forward. I think we just need to find what works for us. I think that's one thing that's definitely up and coming. Another thing that's up and coming is how support for like different constituencies in our workforce, parents, women, like things like parental leave is something we're looking at. Like, should we be giving men and women equal parental leave? We already have policies that differentiate. I think women get more time away when they take a maternity break, but paternity leaves are vary by country. So should we equalize them across the board? Right. So it encourages people. To participate in a more wholesome way, right? So there's many, and as they come along, I'm sure we will broadcast and advertise.
Thank you, Sunil. I think, those are, thanks for your sharing on some of the possible areas, that organizations need to rethink in terms of changes to their policies to support this. And maybe finally for Najati, I think it'd be great to hear from you. How do you see, tripartite partners, unions, employers, and employees, right? Government, do we need to develop, guidelines and regulations, to support hybrid work? What do you see are some of the things that, tripartite partners can do?
Yeah, I would say, the pandemic kind of took us all by surprise. As Sunil was saying, it required a lot of pivoting by a lot of organizations, a lot of institutions. I think it raised awareness about the use of technology and work. To be honest, prior to the pandemic, we weren't really getting an enormous amount of requests from our constituents. But since about March of 2020, this has been telework has been the dominant feature of our work. Overwhelming, unprecedented, I would say. And a lot of the requests that we've received really are about how our constituents can structure, create frameworks, create regulations or legislation, or some kind of guidance about how to structure how telework can be done. What are the factors that need to be considered? What are the elements that need to be put together? We actually published a practical guide in very quick time to address some of these concerns. This was coming in real time, and we were getting questions, and frankly speaking, we were getting questions not only from the private sector, we were getting questions from ministries who had been perhaps considering it, but not really adopted. So we've been working with government ministries and with the private sector to develop measures. Many of the elements have been identified by Sunil and Mahuran in this sort of discussion, dealing with issues relating to everything from parental leave, family leave, to working hours. One of the elements I think that's very important in this discussion that's been coming very aggressively, and I think will continue to come with regard to working hours for telework, is the right to disconnect. When can you stop? When are you obliged to work, and when can you stop? When can you take a pause? So I think that's going to be very important. I think realistically, one other point I would like to make with regard to sort of international labor standards, which is a very central feature of the International Labor Organization. There is currently no international labor standard explicitly focusing on telework. So the work that we're doing is about developing policies and guidance and how to do it effectively. And I think as Sunil and Mahuran have identified, it's about creating frameworks that involve all the tripartite constituents, governments, workers, employers, making a system that's transparent, making a system that's adaptable to circumstances. We are in a situation where this was mandatory telework, but what we're trying to transition to is a voluntary or agreed form of telework, as well as hybrid work. Hybrid work, I think we also need to define properly as well. Hybrid work is part working in the office, part working from another location like home. And I think Sunil identified some key issues in terms of, funding of home offices, funding of laptops, things of that nature. Those are important considerations in terms of effective telework. Standardized software. It sounds really odd, but there are a lot of organizations, institutions that really were caught out by this, didn't have standardized software, and that adds to the tension for a lot of workers. So we've identified some of the points I think have been identified by Sunil and Mahuran, and I won't go much further into that. But from an ILO perspective, we've been working aggressively on this. We're monitoring data. We're following all of the research, which is coming out very quickly in real time. We're trying to work with national statistical offices to try and collect more data about telework. We don't see this as disappearing. We see this as the beginning of the discussion. We're at the very early stages of this discussion. So we think that this is going to be something that we will continue to focus on in the future. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thanks, Najati. I think it's good to hear that, the ILO, is also looking at setting, standards or guidelines, right, on hybrid work or telework. So I think we can open it up, to the rest, Mahuran and Sunil wants to join in, because I think what I'm hearing is that what is important if we want to implement hybrid work sustainably, we also need to look at not just, writing out the policies and guidelines, which are actually, maybe what we call the standards, but at the end of the day, we also need to be clear on how we're going to practice it in our organization and different organizations, because your cultures are different. So the norms that you actually want to create, will be different. So for example, as Najati, you mentioned, what is is there a switch off time, for example? What is acceptable, right, in our own organizations on that? In fact, I see one of the questions from the participants, is, how can policymakers, tripartite partners, or, what kind of help can we actually support, our managers to even engage, more effectively with their team members? Because as you say, a lot of the feature of telework is actually the use of technology, and we all are very familiar with Zoom, for example, but how do we actually engage our teams virtually more effectively? What are the new norms, that we should, implement? So maybe whether Sunil or Mahuran or anybody, who would you like to maybe contribute to this discussion on this question?
I would just say one thing very quickly.
Yes.
One of the central features of what we incorporated into our practical guide on telework is, from a management perspective, to focus on results rather than process.
Okay. Yeah.
It's to focus on outcomes and outputs rather than on process. Not to stop engaging with teleworkers on a regular basis. It's still important to provide feedback and provide information, but to focus ultimately on the end product rather than whether I see you working, whether I see you, doing the standard 9 to 5 or whatever. Okay. I'll let the other.
Thanks, Najati. Mahuran, any contribution from what do you think of?
Okay, thank you. I agree with Najati. So we should actually focus on the process and also feedback, not only on the end process. Okay, that one is totally 100%. I agree with that. Okay, the question on how to make sure that this hybrid work, to implement that successfully. The two things that I want to share here is based on our experience and also industry engagement. Yeah, the factor that contribute to make sure that this hybrid work is the first one is the leadership and the culture. Okay, the clear leadership voice that articulate what FWA or what is hybrid work means to the organization and what it look like in practice. So therefore, enhance the culture by leveraging on communication and also the engagement in the organization. So meaning that all level of employees must understand and the importance and the benefit of having this hybrid work and also the FWA in their mindset. Okay, and ongoing training, awareness activities, improvement initiative to reinforce it is very important. So the last one is to build the mutual trust. This is important, a mutual trust. Okay, encourage the accountability by allowing employees to manage their own working time, but have to show the result of what they have to do. Okay, and the last part is on the technology and the IT system. Of course, this is support employees to work from anywhere, anytime, and establish relevant technical support also important. So meaning that those if there's emergency, the IT support must be there to solve that problem. Okay, in terms of how how we can work from government, industry, so that we can have a policy. As mentioned earlier, hybrid work and also FWAs in Malaysia is an initiative that is in line in the government's, our government's, focusing on the uplifting the well-being of Malaysians, okay, through the implementation of measures and policy which ensure both public and private sector. Okay, so those policy that I mentioned, that I share with you all just now, okay, will be incorporated in the employment policy. Okay, so which is aligned to our government's, the ministry agenda to develop a competent, productive, responsive and resilient national human capital base for Malaysia. So I know we are going there. Okay, Malaysia is going there. So we will achieve that. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you, Mahuran. So it sounds like the government through Telecom is actually also coming up and thinking of some framework or policies to actually facilitate this. Yeah. And so now I'm just thinking, because we talked about sustainable implementation of hybrid work, and I think we've heard from Najati as well as Mahuran that even training, and how we can facilitate or implement training so that people know how to implement hybrid work. Has that also been a feature and what Gojek has been doing to transit and enable especially managers, supervisors down the line to be able to I suppose implement hybrid work more seamlessly?
Yeah, I think sadly for us, we've had to learn on the go. We're building the plane as we're flying it. But that being said, our focus for the upcoming year is on manager effectiveness. So basically equipping them with mindsets, techniques, and just organizational resources on how to manage their teams better. I mentioned, I alluded a little bit earlier about the role of the manager changing, because if you look at the points of engagement an employee has today, it's the screen, which is the software and the technology, and then it's the manager. Pre-pandemic, managers were accountable for 70% of a person's engagement in the organization. I think post-pandemic, there are no stats yet, but I suspect that numbers inched up significantly higher. Because that person becomes the only genuine connection point, human connection point to the organization. So I think definitely enabling managers to manage their teams well and really play the role of coach, mentor, counselor. There are these new dimensions of what it means to be a manager that are emerging. And I think we're just piecing that apart right now and trying to equip those in management roles to do that. I think we are going to see a future, and this is me looking into the crystal ball with no data, but I think we're going to see a future where there will be the advent of the pure manager, where their full-time job is to manage team and individual performance. And today managers do a little bit of their own work, which is they have an individual contributor quotient to their work. And then they manage the team to outcomes. I think tomorrow you'll see the pure manager where it's 100% about helping team members succeed and helping meet goals, which is a big trend that's coming. And I think the sooner people lean into that trend, the quicker they will find that it becomes easier to make some of these pivots that are up and coming. So long answer to your very short question. We are making investments. But I think more importantly, the bigger investment is in the change management of the role of manager. So helping people understand what the new role is going to entail.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask a little bit more your thoughts what Mahuran has also mentioned earlier, that one of the key success factors in good implementation is that there needs to be a culture of trust, right? So that people who work from home are not so suspicious of, hey, why are you working from home? What are you doing at home, right? So that mindset, but it all stems from trusting our people, that they are able to achieve the outcomes, right? Not just the process, right? So, but in organizations, when we talk about culture of trust, that is sometimes quite nebulous. How do we, what would be your advice, from the panel, and how do we go about doing this, building, this culture of trust?
I could go first. So I think trust doesn't have to be nebulous. It's fundamentally, are you keeping the promises you make? Are you a reliable person? Are your colleagues reliable? Do people keep are you communicating facts and information required to do things successfully, clearly, and often, and in a timely way? I think these are very, very measurable inputs, and we should measure them. We measure them in our engagement survey. So we know what the trust quotient somewhat is. So I think we call it psychological safety because trust feeds into psychological safety, and some of those questions inform psychological safety. So I think it doesn't have to be a nebulous thing. It is real. I want to echo both Najati and Mahuran's points on work. Don't get obsessed on the process of how work gets done. Be more obsessed about the quality and the outcomes themselves. And be there as a support mechanism when you feel like the inputs need to be audited, right? When inputs are going to be audited, when things are not delivered to expectations, then you need to go in and see what process did you follow. But till then, default to trust. And then that's a very measurable thing.
Thank you very much, Sunil. I think, good point, to say that at the end of the day, we can measure culture, we can measure trust. I mean, if you look at, the behaviors that what you're looking for, so you can look out for it. But I suppose, the role of, creating trust is also every leader's role, right? Like you say, keeping the promises, and being open, and transparent, about things. But one of the questions that we are seeing here is actually like how to, employers and even, government, actually maybe engage, the workers, engage unions, for example, to create, to ensure that hybrid work, can really be implemented. And I suppose if you're looking at it, maybe from a union's perspective, how available, right, can hybrid work be, across, the different roles. So.
Yeah, I think with regard to unions, I think because this is such a new subject for so many people, I think it's we're all learning as we go. I think Sunil's metaphor about building the plane as we fly it is very appropriate in this context. I think with regard to trade unions, one of the issues I think that I think often governments and employers may be more focused on this issue than they are in engaging the trade unions or their workers in the process. I think it's important. I think certainly from an ILO perspective, we feel that having worker engagement, particularly in the form of trade unions, in this process is instrumental. As I said in the beginning, getting the participation of trade unions and workers in the development of any national guidance, in guidance that comes in collective bargaining agreements, in workplace implementation, trade unions are instrumental in this process, and they need to be, and worker representatives need to be engaged in the process. As I said in the beginning, the commitment, everybody being committed to this process means that the process will function more effectively and will be more readily adaptable to circumstances. The other point that I would like to make is that from an ILO perspective, we have a tendency to focus on the structures and the frameworks. And part of the reason for that is to make sure that everybody understands in a fair and equitable way how these policies work. It's not enough to kind of create the policies and then have an imbalance so people don't know how they apply and how they work. And this is where I think workers and union representation can be important in ensuring that what's created actually functions and is viable.
Thank you, Najati. I'm afraid we have run out of time. I think there's still some questions, but we really need to wrap up now. But really, thank you so much, for all the active participation, Sunil, Mahuran, and Najati. So back to you, Maya, to the host.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Thank you, Sunil, Najati, and Mahuran, for the incredible sharing as well. I mean, the attendees has a lot of questions, just like what Jacqueline mentioned, but we have run out of time. I guess this topic is never ending. We can just go on, but we have come to the end of this session. So I thank you so much, and I hope all of you take care and stay safe. Now, the next session we have for the ASEAN Future of Work conference track is an interesting panel discussion again, which focuses on mental well-being and work-life harmony. So to watch this session, it starts at 11:30 a.m., which is 15 minutes from now. Please toggle over to the session page under conference agenda. Also, if I can get all of you, dear attendees, to submit your feedback on this session via the link that you can see right now on the chat box here on the platform. If you can just participate on that feedback form, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you, and looking forward to seeing you in the next panel discussion at 11:30 a.m. Thank you. Dear speakers, take care and stay safe.